que nos lleva a saludar a nuestra siguiente invitada. Ella se llama Rowena Chiu. Rowena fue asistente de Harvey Weinstein, quien recordemos hasta hace unos años era reconocido como tal vez uno de los grandes hombres de la producción del cine en Hollywood. Ella también fue víctima de sus agresiones sexuales. Recordemos que las denuncias en contra de Weinstein se han hecho por más de 100 mujeres, que van desde reconocidas actrices, personas y mujeres que han estado en el mundo del cine, hasta alguien como Rowena Chiu, que era su asistente. Rowena, thank you very much for being with us on W Radio. Good evening.
Hello.
Hello. How's everything, Rowena?
Good, thank you. Very sunny here in California.
Well, here in Bogota, it's a little bit cold, but let's go with your story. We just want to know, for starting, how did you met Mr. Harvey Weinstein?
So I started working for Harvey in one of my first couple of jobs out of college. Immediately before joining Miramax, I was with a talent agency called International Creative Management, which is a big Hollywood talent agency. I worked for them in London, and I was recruited from that office to join Miramax's UK office.
Pues nos cuenta que fue muy poco después de salir de la universidad que fue contactada por una de las agencias que están relacionadas con Miramax, particularmente la agencia que se encuentra en la ciudad de Londres, y así fue como ella terminó trabajando de la mano de esta productora. Y yo quiero saber, ¿y al cuánto tiempo de empezar a trabajar con esta agencia y con Miramax conoció al señor Weinstein? And after how much time of working there in Miramax you met Mr. Weinstein?
Well, I was recruited to be an assistant to Harvey Weinstein. So my job was to accompany him on his European travels and to work in the London office when he wasn't traveling to Europe. So I met him pretty much immediately after I was recruited for the job.
And how was that first moment, that first meeting with him?
You know, he is a difficult person to work for. So I had received a lot of warning about that. You know, he's frequently angry, and he is certainly a very difficult person to please.
Bueno, nos dice que ella empezó a trabajar con el señor Weinstein apenas la contrataron, porque a ella la contrataron para ser asistente personal del señor Weinstein en Europa. Así que trabajaba con él cuando estaba de gira en Europa y era su asistente cuando estaba en la oficina principal de ellos en Londres. ¿Cómo es trabajar con Harvey Weinstein? Difícil. Es un hombre de mal genio, es un hombre complicado, es un hombre bastante particular, pero sobre todo un hombre que es difícil de manejar.
Juan Pablo, yo quiero preguntarle a nuestra invitada, pues, cómo empezaron esas manifestaciones de acoso por parte del señor Weinstein y, pues, ella qué hizo en ese momento.
And what happened? When was that moment when you first saw that sexual misconduct from Mr. Weinstein?
So it took place on my first overseas trip accompanying Harvey. I worked with another assistant, Zelda Perkins, who worked as the first assistant, and I was the second assistant. We were actually at the time at the Venice Film Festival, where Harvey was promoting a number of Miramax films, and he was also there to collect an award. Typically what happens is that the first assistant would wake Harvey up in the morning and spend some hours with him first thing in the morning before the second assistant comes to start a later shift. So we would work together from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. But there were certainly hours late in the evening and early in the morning where each of us as assistants would be alone with him. And they were difficult times in terms of his attempts to cajole, to ask us for inappropriate, massages, to be naked in the room when we were in the room. So there was certainly difficult behavior. My assault took place the second night that I was in Venice, when I was in a hotel room alone with him.
Pues nos dice que todo ocurrió en el primer viaje que hicieron. Fueron al Festival de Venecia. ¿Cómo opera Harvey Weinstein en estos viajes? Tiene dos asistentes. Tiene un primer asistente que es el que lo acompaña en la mañana, de hecho es quien lo despierta, quien está con él en esas primeras horas del día. Luego tienen un punto en el que se cruzan y ella era la segunda asistente que le tocaba entonces todos los eventos de la tarde y hasta la noche. El horario de ella, 10 de la mañana a 10 de la noche. Y era ya en esas horas finales del día en donde empezó a darse esa conducta sexual inadecuada o incorrecta por parte del señor Weinstein. Le pedía masajes, le decía que cuando estaban juntos en la habitación del hotel ella estuviera desnuda, y esto ocurrió en la segunda noche que pasaron ya juntos trabajando en ese Festival de Venecia.
Juan Pablo, preguntémosle por favor a nuestra invitada el tema del miedo, del silencio, de cómo actuar frente a un personaje tan poderoso y finalmente cómo se rompe ese temor y salen a denunciar.
Now let's talk about keeping this quiet, Rowena. How difficult was to you to keep this in silence, and how was that moment in which you decided to talk about it?
Right. Well, the morning after the assault, I spoke to my immediate superior, who was the first assistant, because I was new to the job. And whilst I understood that the job was a difficult and challenging job, obviously I wasn't expecting to be assaulted as part of the role. So I was very upset. I went to report it to her. And to be honest, when I reported things to her, I didn't know what would happen. I wasn't sure whether we would go to the police, we would report it as a crime, we would try to keep it internally within Miramax. But, once I had reported the incident to my immediate superior, events started to take place that were really sort of not really within my control. As in, we talked a bit about going to the police, but it was difficult because we were in Italy, we didn't speak Italian, we didn't have an infrastructure with which to go to the police. So we waited until we got back to London. We reported Harvey's behavior within Miramax UK. We consulted with some lawyers. And in the end, we ended up, Harvey flew over to the UK with his personal lawyer, and we ended up negotiating, as is well known now, this very difficult and onerous NDA. It's difficult to explain the circumstances under which, we as young people were forced into signing this NDA. We had very little power at the time. We didn't even have money to pay lawyers. We were not in a position to sue Harvey, and really he had all of the cards in his hand. So it ended up that we signed an NDA. We accepted a settlement fee, and in return for that, we agreed to keep silent about this assault, essentially for the rest of our lives. The NDA covers a great deal of material about how we were not permitted to speak to family or friends. It made it incredibly difficult for us to seek any kind of professional help. If we wanted to get the help of a therapist or a lawyer, those professionals would have to sign an undertaking with Harvey's lawyers in London. As it happened, in the years that followed that NDA, it is impossible to get a therapist or a lawyer to talk to you when you are not allowed to reveal any details about the case, and they have to sign a legal undertaking even to be speaking to you. So in the end, over 20 years, I did not tell my family or my friends or even my husband, who I eventually married, was married to for 10 years with 4 children. We never talked about working for Harvey Weinstein. And of course, I was unable to seek the advice of either a therapist or a lawyer or a doctor during that time.
Bueno, pues nos cuenta un episodio bastante penoso, Andrea, porque literalmente la hicieron firmar un acuerdo para que se quedara callada. Nos relata que al día siguiente del asalto sexual del cual fue víctima, ella habló con su superior. Su superiora era la primera asistente, la que lo despertaba en la mañana. Le contó lo que pasó y pensaron si denunciarlo ahí, esperar y denunciarlo ante la oficina de Miramax. Decidieron no hacerlo en Italia porque primero estaban de trabajo, segundo, ir a la policía teniendo en cuenta que ninguna de las dos hablaba italiano, pues era inconveniente, así que esperaron a llegar a Londres. Al llegar a Londres lo comentaron con los directivos de Miramax en el Reino Unido y arrancó un proceso de negociación en donde los abogados de Harvey Weinstein negociaron con ella el pago de una suma de dinero a cambio de un NDA, Non-Disclosure Agreement, un acuerdo para que ella guardara silencio. Dice ella que era joven, no tenía los recursos para demandar penalmente a Weinstein, así que lo aceptó y por eso se vio obligada a guardar silencio durante casi 20 años. No le pudo decir a su familia, no le pudo decir a sus amigos, no pudo contratar siquiera un terapista o un psicólogo para que le ayudara, porque sencillamente no podía decir nada. Durante 20 años llevó una vida en silencio, se casó y no le pudo contar a su esposo, tuvo hijos, sus hijos no lo sabían. Quiso buscar un psicólogo, pero no lo podía hacer porque no le podía contar a nadie. Ese fue el silencio que tuvo que guardar.
Increíble, Juan Pablo, todo esto. Este caso también tuvo una incidencia mundial, recordemos que es el conocido efecto Weinstein, el Me Too. Yo quiero preguntarle si cree que las mujeres han ido perdiendo ese temor a denunciar, especialmente a esos hombres que abusan por ser poderosos o por tener un alto cargo.
Do you think that after, well, the whole story about Harvey Weinstein, the Me Too movement, women have lost fear of telling this kind of stories, of going to the police and put this type of persons in front of a judge? Do you think that this reality has changed, that women have evolved, or fear is still there?
That more of a permanent sea change has been made now that the Me Too movement, has created this kind of cultural and societal change. I think there's a few things that are important to note. One, it is not purely the burden of women only to feel brave and to come forward and speak, but it requires a cultural change, not just in women, but also in both men and women, certainly in the workplace. Harvey did not operate alone. He had a network of people who enabled him, and they were both men and women. And so cultural change around sexual harassment in the workplace has to come from both men and women. Men have to stop protecting other men, and indeed women who are at senior positions have to stop protecting the men that perpetrate these kind of crimes. Secondly, I think resolution can be found in places other than just in front of a judge. Of course, it is terribly frightening for someone who's been the victim of a sexual assault, not only just to speak out about it, but to think that this might end in a criminal case or a civil case in front of a judge. But if behavior changes in the workplace and also in the home and in the factory and in restaurants and in other places where sexual assault is perpetrated, I would like to think that we can stop this kind of behavior from happening earlier on with education and discipline before it gets to the stage where women are assaulted as part of something that they are doing for work.
Bueno, pues nos dice Rowena que sí, ella considera que el movimiento hizo algo, algo muy importante, y es que las mujeres pues pudieran llenarse un poco más de valor a la hora de contar esto. Pero lo más importante es empezar a generar cambios en las actitudes en las oficinas. ¿Por qué? Porque es que estos hombres poderosos no están solos. Hay hombres y mujeres que los acompañan, que conocen sus acciones y callan ante ellas. Eso es algo que tiene que detenerse también, porque hay cómplices prácticamente que terminan protegiendo a quienes han cometido este tipo de hechos. Hay que estar muy atento a los cambios del comportamiento de las mujeres. Hay que entender que en algunas ocasiones esa puede ser la señal de algo que no se pudo detener. Rowena, thank you very much for your time, for being with us, and tell and share with us your story and with our listeners.
Of course, it was a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you.
Bye bye. Es Rowena Chiu, ex asistente, víctima de Harvey Weinstein. Tuvo que guardar silencio durante 20 años. 20 años por esta historia. Andrea, nos vamos. Paola, nos vamos. Mauricio, nos fuimos.
Pero volvemos el lunes.
Vamos,
sí.
Pero además el lunes no se pueden perder lo que viene el lunes.
Pues es que el lunes a esta hora se estará sentando en esta silla Hernán Peláez. Así que a las 2 de la tarde tenemos una cita el próximo lunes con Hernán Peláez, pero hoy, siendo la 1:57, tenemos una cita con Shintaro Sakamoto.